Deathloop, the anticipated 2021 first-person shooter experience developed by Arcane Lyon, the French video game developer that you've likely seen in the works of previously in 2012's Dishonored, 2016's Dishonored 2, 2017's Prey, and the 2023's epic failure, Redfall. Deathloop was also published by the well-known Bethesda Softworks, which you've definitely heard of from one buggy title to the next.
What the hell? Oh my gosh!
Deathloop sees you playing as the main character, Colt Vaughn, former assassin, stuck within the time loop on a small series of islands known as Black Reef, with one immediate goal in mind: to break the loop. So sit back, relax, grab one of those rubber chickens with a bow tie, and without further ado, let's review.
Enjoy the beach.
Hey, you. You're finally awake.
For our first category, we'll dive into the game's graphics. Deathloop is one of many games that takes its own stylistic direction into metamodernism, with beautiful, rigid, bleak, and barren landscapes stuffed full of seemingly Bioshock-inspired buildings, decor, character models, and more, adding in a lot of vibrant color schemes to the desolate landscape to really make the presence of the Eternalists pop and keeping attention grabbed, making for a very visually impressive experience. The character design is very well done, and I really like the retro punk art design of the clothing and accessories that really forms a 1960s to 70s party like the world will never end vibe, which in this case, it wouldn't. Something I didn't like one bit is the weapon design, but we'll get a lot more into that in the mechanics section of the review. Right here, I'll just say that I absolutely despise them. I think that they're ugly, clunky, and while I know that they were going for a very specific design to match the world around it, I think they failed. The weapons in Deathloop, as I talked about on stream, remind me of whatever dorks worked on the gun design in Fallout 4, who clearly don't understand good weapon design. As far as lighting, shadows, and special effects are done, I'm actually very impressed. With the arsenal of equipment at your disposal like slabs, which are basically magic augmentations, and access to grenades, the effects are all vibrant, immersive, colorful, and smoothly done, which aids Deathloop in being a very visually consistent experience from start to finish. Jesus. And with the specific art style taken, this game doesn't absolutely eat up your GPU, allowing you to have a seamless experience on low to mid-end gaming setups. Yeah, I've seen a lot of the Barbie animated movies. Okay, don't jump over the cliff and die this time. Note to self.
A bit lonely otherwise, lol.
Bringing us into our next section. For the most part, the gameplay mechanics are phenomenal. They're extensive, immersive, and easy to grasp. The controls are pretty straightforward for a first-person shooter with active abilities in the form of your slabs. Deathloop definitely doesn't leave you lacking in terms of playstyle, and I found myself switching the way I played throughout the game as I got new gear and upgrades to try out. From sniping from a distance, to closing gaps with shotguns, running gunning with dual-wield pistols, or going on a full massacre spree with a machete. All of which can be augmented further with weapon perks, character perks, slabs, and using different variety of the grenade the game gives you, which has 3 switchable modes, like the frag grenade, proximity mine, and the tripwire. All of this and more leaves you with a very dense mechanical system that can tickle the brain of casual and hardcore gamers alike. The gameplay loop in Deathloop is quite complex to grasp in the beginning stages of the game, as you try your best to navigate your way through the time stream. I found myself quite confused for a good amount of time in the beginning of the game with how residuum works and what exactly gets carried over into the new loops. It wasn't until a few loops into the game I really started to get the hang of the important areas to hit and at what time of the day I should be hitting them. Now, you might be thinking, oh, he's a bit slow in the brain, he's giving this a bad score because he struggled to understand it for an above average amount of time. No. I for one really like when games give you that learning curve and drive confusion, force you to ask questions, and continue to test you as you move onward, unraveling the mystery and learning as you go. There's almost nothing better than not knowing how something is working mechanically, and then boom, it clicks. It makes sense, and now maybe you see where you were going wrong. And I love how Deathloop gave me that feeling early to mid-game as I explored more of Black Reef. The progression system is well thought out and laid out sporadically in a way that there's almost no way you're going to be piecing important stuff together on your first few loops. One loop you'll find a bunker door that's sealed or a note giving instructions for a puzzle that's important for game progression, but it's always ultimately up to you to track and follow that lead. Sometimes requiring you to purposely loop yourself back to the start of the day to continue leading you on this wild goose chase through the time jump day after day as you gather what you need to ultimately end the cycle. And on the topic of ending the cycle, there's this absolute Juliana trying to stop you. We'll talk more about her in the story section, but this brings in a whole new game mechanic to keep track of in the form of raids. Is that what you'd call it? I don't really know, I kind of forget. Basically, when you go into a new zone, there's this chance for Juliana to come into your world and hunt you down. And depending on your settings in the game, this can be an AI or an actual player with actual equipment coming to wreck your shit. I kept the player-based raids on for more than half of my playthrough so I could get a real feel for the whole game experience, and it was great. I loved the adrenaline of competing against a real person with real strategies and tactics. It really gave me the most dangerous game vibes of hunt or be hunted, and I can't lie, many of these players whooped my butt. But the main reason I ended up turning off the mechanic was because I kept going AFK in game to talk to my stream, and every single time I tapped back, I was dead because a raid happened and they just decided to defile my AFK corpse. 10 out of 10 game mechanic. As you progress through the game, looping days and acquiring new gear and abilities, the game ramps up in difficulty as the loop becomes more unstable, bringing in an amazing way of balancing the game and continuing to make it more challenging in a way that actually fits the story and scales to how far you've been progressing, leaving you with a difficulty scaling that depends pretty much entirely on you as you play. Being a primarily story-based game, there isn't all that much value in replaying unless you missed secrets that you wish to go back for. I'd say after about 2 playthroughs, the game is pretty much cooked unless you're a cult fan. However, bonus points to Deathloop for incorporating a secondary game mode that we have already spoken about in the form of Protecting the Loop, where you take control of Juliana and put your effort towards hindering other players in their campaigns. Now, before we cap this off, I said that I'd talk about the weapons here in this category, but honestly, do I even need to roast them? I mean, look at this.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on, boy. Get your goddamn ass on.
I think my point has already been made about how much I dislike them visually in the prior category, but to put it simply, I also don't really care for how they perform either. Most of them being old, hardly functional scrap weapons with an annoying jam mechanic, and don't get me started on the amount of times you have to reload some of these weapons because of their low ammo capacities. I understand that the retro steampunk style of weapons is what fits into the Deathloop world, but come on, man. I was less than satisfied with almost every weapon except for the machete, which led me to always circling back to a kind of run and hack and slash playstyle. But anyways, enough moaning about this, I think you get the point. So I screened the back out of it and I turned it into an emote. And so they allow me to have that fucking channel point thing. But I tried... That's so stupid. Moving into the story of Deathloop, we are served an interestingly unique narrative structure that, as you know, takes us on a widespread journey all through the events of one day, eventually bringing us to a big endgame reveal. Deathloop's world is full of many secrets and mysteries, not all being essential for story progression. The character development through this game is actually quite static, as through the primary story, Colt aims to destroy the loop, Juliana aims to stop him, and every other NPC just continues to live the day as it were. It's not until the very end of the game where you're faced with a true choice, to end the loop or to give in to Juliana and keep it going. The plot of Deathloop is not quite as cut and dry as it first appears, as your one and only goal to destroy the loop gets more and more complicated with each day that passes as you uncover what needs to be done in order to pull off this magnificent feat. I absolutely love how the scope of everything continues to broaden up until you have everything perfectly lined up and ready to pop. The build-up of excitement through action-packed gameplay as you gear up, acquire new abilities, uncover mysteries, and get better at wreaking havoc is immense, and in the final act, getting to see all of your hard work unfold is truly fulfilling. The dialogue in this game is something that I developed a love-hate relationship with throughout the story, as in the first half of my playthrough I absolutely loved the witty banter between Colt and Juliana when you entered a new zone. Their chemistry clicks so well with cutting and cunning remarks at one another. However, there definitely was a turning point where it got kind of annoying to hear her constantly chirping at me when I was on a hot streak of hopping into new zones and looping days fairly quickly. I'm a man that above all else dislikes repetition, especially when it comes to dialogue, which is why I can't play games like Overwatch or Marvel Rivals for a long period of time due to their constant one-liners every time you proc an ability. It drives me absolutely mental. I do, however, like the less repetitive banter you get between Colt and the other characters of the game, so really just that one grudge. The world building in Deathloop is phenomenal as you get thrown right into the game with no memory of what's going on, really allowing you to dig in and figure out the Black Reef mysteries for yourself. It would be pretty lame if the game threw you in with all of your prior knowledge of who was where and who was when, but they said that, and I definitely give my applause to that. Finishing up this section, I want to mix two subcategories together, being player choice and conclusion/resolution. The final act in the game sees you completing what you sought out to do and finding yourself face to face with Juliana, where you are faced with one last chance to finalize what you've done. This is the only instance of major player choice in the story, but yet the way they do it is so essential. Being forced onto a path of rage and hatred for the loop, only to actually be held responsible as the player to finalize the decision and really weigh in on that guilt. There's something about that brings so much pressure, as no longer are you on a fixed story set to end in a certain way. Now, the decision, and thus the consequences, are on you. This brings the game to a very intense standoff situation where you have time to really weigh in on your actions. Who are you? What do you stand for? Has anything leading to this conclusion impacted which path you would have taken? Feel free to let me know in the comments what you decided to do and how this ending impacted your story. But for now, let's move on into the fourth category, being audio. Oh my heart. Holy shit. That scared the shit out of me, man. What the fuck? Oh my god! The Deathloop soundtrack is easily the most extensive album we've covered, with 2 hours and 30-minute runtime over 59 tracks, spanning from in-game sound effects that are as short as 6 seconds to long suspense action hybrid tracks well over 10 minutes long. As far as I could find, and then pardon my pronunciation, Michael I'm just gonna put it up on screen, was the art director for the album, and the tracks were composed by Tom Salta, an American musician who you've heard the works of in Wolfenstein, The Outlast Trials, PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, and many of the Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon installments, as well as a bunch of the Halo Anniversary installments, among more. This album sports many great tracks that complement the suspenseful spy thriller aspect of the game and ramp up into invigorating scores. But for me, the choice for my favorite track of the album easily has to go with the game's original trailer track, Deja Vu, and a special mention to the unnecessarily catchy Lady S, which actually still holds a spot in my Spotify playlist as I find myself listening to it months after playing the game. And my least favorite going to Madame K, which is basically just a minute and some change of annoying clown or circus music. As for sound effects, despite my disdain for the guns in the game, everything sounded really great. From the simple gunfire to the more sci-fi sound effects of your abilities, and all the way into the voice acting that I've already spoken highly of. So, it's time to come clean. If you were paying attention during my script reading just a minute ago, you may have noticed that I said that I've been listening to the song Lady S for some time now, and that's because I sort of got hit by a brick wall partway through piecing this project together, which left me with a little over half a script pre-written from well over a month ago, and naturally over time I have forgotten a sizable amount of both what I really did enjoy and didn't enjoy from my original experience. Generally when I do this, I stream all of the gameplay and then start the script writing as soon as possible to preserve my untainted thoughts and feelings. So I apologize if any of this ends up being inconsistent or rushed. Formal apology out of the way, let's wrap up with one of the final categories, value. Where the fuck are the stairs at? Whoa! That guy's body just fucking did his torso just did a 360. For some reason, after about admittedly only 5 minutes of searching, I couldn't seem to find a price tag for Deathloop upon release. However, the game today sits at a typical AAA price tag of about $80 Canadian, so I would assume that was likely the release price as well. Now keep in mind that I played Deathloop on Xbox Game Pass, completely bypassing that price tag. The interwebs tell me that if you mainly focus on the main story, you'll likely run about 16 hours of playtime, with the completionist landing in the ballpark of 35 hours, and my own playthrough landing at about the 19 to 20 hour mark. The gameplay is fun, invigorating, and engaging. There are hardly any stale moments while traversing Blackreef, making for a fun and compelling experience well through the story. However, being a campaign-based game, as we covered earlier, the game suffers pretty heavily from lack of replay value. I don't see many casual gamers sparking this one up for round 2 after you've completed it the first time. The length of Deathloop is respectable, with upwards of 35 hours of playtime should you seek to get everything possible from the experience, but I for one don't think that's a reasonable expectation. At around the 10 to 12 hour mark, I found myself getting quite bored of the repetition of cycles through the loop and leaving me quite frustrated at times when I was slain and had to start the day over when all I wanted to do was make progress. In my opinion, this game suffers pretty hard past the 10 to 12 hour mark, as usually by this point you've gotten the grasp of how the flow of time and progression works, and you're kind of just running through the motions of looping days until you're ready for the finale. And I personally wouldn't justify spending $80 for a game that gets stale that quick. If it were 20 to 25 hours of new and exciting gameplay, then yeah, maybe, but in my honest opinion, I think the game would have been a much better experience keeping the game's runtime to around 12 to 16 hours and slashing the price tag down a sizable amount to reflect that, instead of trying to push the story on for as long as possible to where it feels too stretched out. This makes it pretty hard to justify a good rating here, as I've played this game and I can safely say I would not pay the full $80 price tag for this. However, if you have Game Pass to play it, or it comes on sale, I would say that this is a must-play experience. All in all, I'm truly happy to have played this game. It was a fun game to stream, and the experience was immaculate, and after all is said and done, that is truly what it is about. And now that the yapping is done, let's take a look at our final numbers for this review. I left Deathloop with a 4 out of 5 for graphics, docking off a point exclusively for poor weapon design, but definitely making up for that with stunning visuals, character designs, and artistic direction. Similarly, I left gameplay mechanics also with a 4 out of 5 for pretty well the exact same reason: those damn unfunctional weapons. But yet again, on the flip side, the intense gameplay, unique mechanics like slabs and multiple grenade options, as well as how the game progresses mechanically, among more, pulls that score up as high as I can feel comfortable giving. I left the story with a crisp 5 out of 5 for its unique narrative, plot, themes, world building, and conclusion, all leaving this game with an overwhelmingly positive experience. And similarly to that, audio also catches a nice 5 out of 5 for the fantastic voice acting, great original game soundtrack, as well as immersion. For value, I left the game with a lackluster 2.5 out of 5, because this is just an experience that I would not want any passionate gamer to miss out on, but I also just can't justify that full price tag for what I truly only see as being between 12 to 16 hours of meaningful gameplay. And lastly, I left Deathloop with a 4 out of 5 for my own personal overall impression for every reason stated above, and docking 1 point off for the weapons and unfortunate full retail price, which leaves Deathloop with a 24.5 out of 30 on the review chart for an 81.6%. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and if you enjoyed it, consider showing your support by leaving a like, subscribing, and leaving a comment with what you would have rated Deathloop based on your own personal experience, or just leave any general feedback or recommendations. I love to hear any of it. I probably don't need to be apologizing for having this video delayed for so long, but for anybody out there who may be a fan of where this channel is going, I am truly sorry for the delay. This review definitely and regrettably was a little bit rushed so that I can get onto my next project as fast as possible, but I hope that you enjoyed it all the same. But for now, that's all I have for you, so until next time, farewell.